such words of praise. There's a saying in Hindi, "Khuda meherban to gadha pehlwan." No, I indeed mean it. Just some pieces of advice that you should keep in mind. A lot of success in life is oftentimes achieved by being at the right place at the right time. And I've had my share of luck in being at the right place at the right time. So I honestly don't take too much credit apart from the fact that I'm just a honest hard worker. So I will talk about the economy, but economy is run by economists, and you guys are the next generation. So and especially a place like here, SRCC, I would want a lot of you to become economists, going forward as well. And that's why an opportunity like this I cannot miss to hopefully at least inspire a few of you to think about economics as a long-term profession. Because what one is trying to do is not only to help India at this point in time, but also to try and create the environment for India to be actually vibrant as an economy going forward as well. And if without people like you becoming policy advisors in future, actually I think that cannot happen. So just quickly, you would have heard about my journey from being an engineer to then being an economist. One piece of advice that I would want to share, actually, when I look back at life, I think what has helped me a lot is clarity in what I want to do in life. And that clarity is also about what is it that what makes you tick. And when I say what makes you tick, at about your age, when I was actually in IIT, in my maybe 3rd or 4th year, I understood very well that what does not make me tick is money. And oftentimes, to understand what you really like, eliminating what you don't like actually helps you to get at that. Because at the stage at which you are, usually clarity about what you want to do in life doesn't come that easily, and therefore eliminating what you don't like, I think, is very useful. So early on for me, understanding that just having some zeros getting added in some account actually is not something that I want to waste my life over. And that clarity I had very, very early on at a young age. I think that helped enormously in trying to set goals in what I want to do in life. In other words, I don't think I would have been able to articulate this as well at that point in time. But today I actually have a little bit more maturity to articulate this idea. The way I view it is, if your only ambition in life is to be rich, it shows an extreme poverty of ambition. And that is what I have actually pursued. I think that one aspect has helped me a lot in making the right choices. The second aspect is also understanding what you are good at and what you enjoy. So, we don't have a board here, but generally when you invite somebody who's an academic, always give a board. As my academic colleagues here would definitely testify, we somehow feel very incomplete without having a board. So, if you think about let me test your ability to do some mental geometry. So draw a 2x2 matrix in your mind. 2 dimensions there. One dimension is what you like or don't like, okay, and another dimension is are you good at it or not, okay. So you have 4 cells. The question is you can do this for every area that every top specific area that you want to think about. Do you enjoy it? Yes, no. And then are you good at it? Yes, no. Okay. So if suppose economics is something that you enjoy, you're also good at it. You are in cell 1-1 and you've hit gold dust then. Just stick to it. Just stick to it. बस दोबारा मुड़ के नहीं सोचना है फिर. Just keep doing that. Usually क्या होता है, that kind of clarity नहीं आता है. Most of you will be debating between cell 1-2 and cell 2-1, which is that you have to choose between what is it, something that you, let's say, don't enjoy as much but you're good at it, versus something that you are, that you enjoy but maybe you're not as good at it. And that's really the difficult choice to make. The piece of advice that I would give you here is to go after what you enjoy. Why? Because when you enjoy something, work does not really seem like work. I'm reminded of this very nice article that Rahul Dravid wrote when he retired from cricket. In fact, a lot of my learnings oftentimes come from cricket because I follow that game very, very, very closely. So he had mentioned that when he used to go on tours abroad, he'd come back and meet many of his friends, college friends, and many of them would actually crib about, yaar, maza nahi hai, zindagi mein maza nahi hai, that we're just going through the motions, we're doing work, going to office, coming back home, etc. But that zest, that zeal is not there in life. He then wrote that, when I hear them out, actually I find myself so fortunate to be doing something that I really enjoy, so much that I would actually do it without even getting paid for it. So to get paid for doing something that you enjoy is indeed an enormous privilege. Why? Because work does not seem like work. It basically becomes play. And this used to happen with me. My son now, who's actually in the 9th grade, when he was younger, he used to say, if I was watching cricket, many times he would say, Appa, why are you actually watching cricket? You anyway have fun at work. So and that sort of, it's indeed true that when you have fun, work, when you do something that you enjoy, work does not seem like work. And then it's one of the simple credos in life that anything that you work hard at, you will become good at it. So it starts a virtuous cycle. Just because you enjoy it, you work hard, because work does not seem like work. And if you work hard at it, you will become good. When you become good, you will get appreciation, and it's actually this human tendency that we all actually sort of do like getting appreciated. And that makes you work harder, that makes you want to do better, and you just are in this virtuous loop. That's what happens actually when you choose something that you enjoy. Even if you are not that good at it at that point in time, you will become good at it eventually, just over a period of time. And in contrast, if you get into something that you don't enjoy, work will seem like a chore, and you will not, you will flinch at working so hard. Eventually, it will then show on your performance, and performance will then basically show on peers' feedback and superiors' feedback, which will make you deflated, and basically the loop, same virtuous cycle, instead will go as a vicious cycle. So this is sort of the the advice that I want to leave you, and I'll give you just a specific example from my own life. When I was graduating from IIM Calcutta, so after IIT I went to IIMs, and I had the choice to basically pick the best firms that come to recruit there, be it a consulting firm or investment banking firm. I didn't pick either of them. Instead, I actually went and picked up a research job, because that is what I wanted to do. That's what I enjoyed. In terms of the salary that this research job paid, was actually almost less than 1/10 of the salary that I would get if I had gone for either the investment banking or the consulting job. But when I look back now, I think that was the best choice I made, because I really enjoyed what I did. And I can, I'm talking about 1999 when I made that choice. So, almost 20 years since. In 20 years, I can really tell you that the number of days that I would have, had where I've not enjoyed my work, I can count it on my fingers. So over a 20-year period, close to 7,000 days, I can count on my fingers the number of days I've not enjoyed my work. I think that is saying something, right? So oftentimes I get this feedback that I'm very passionate. I'm passionate because actually I really enjoy what I do. So the passion just comes naturally, out of doing something that you enjoy. So just sort of piece of advice, dig into sort of अपने अंदर झांको, क्या पसंद आता है वो सोचो, और पैसे के पीछे मत भागो. Okay? So this is basically the sort of pieces of advice that I give. Why not run after money? Because when you do something that you enjoy, money, post, सब साली धूम मिला के आती है. Really, धूम मिला के आएगी. You just do what you enjoy and become good at it. Every damn thing that you care about actually will come after you. Now you have to make the choice whether do you want to run after those things, or should those things run after you. I think it's far better to have some of those things run after you, right? So that's sort of quick, and that's why you should think about becoming an economist, and actually doing a PhD is an excellent idea. You get to do research, and there isn't a job in the world which is as fun in terms of engaging your creative selves as research. Period. There is no other job which is as fun. And if you don't believe what I'm telling you, go and take a look at any of our most popular president, APJ Abdul Kalam's videos. He talks about Albert Einstein. Do you want to become an Einstein? Do you want to become Thomas Alva Edison? You see the passion for research that he has. He's a scientist actually, and I'm yet to encounter a scientist or researcher who actually was good at it, who did not have that kind of passion. I share that passion for research because it is by far the best job you can get in terms of engaging your your grey cells. Every other job will have a lot of administrative stuff to do. Whatever you learn here, you'll put 20% of that to use maximum, even in the best. But if you get into research, you really get to put to use your, I think, if you're the grey cell, grey cell using kinds, then, research is indeed what. The one other big advantage I'll tell you is sort of a secret that I'll tell you, is if you're an academic. By the way, don't make a lot of academic institutions in India, actually you'll get the sense that, professor basically teaches all through the year. No, in research-driven institutions, you actually do research, all through the year, and you teach a short period of time. And that's what a good academic job is really what it is. So if you get to do research, you get to choose the questions you want to work on. And I tell you, this is indeed true that while I was at after my PhD at the University of Chicago, I was a professor at Emory University in Atlanta, USA, which is basically called the Harvard of the South. And then I was at ISB for 9 years as well. So I've seen the best academic institutions in the world. And I can tell you that even at the best academic institutions, if the dean comes, or dean or the president of the university comes and says, why are you watching cricket today instead of working? You can ask him to basically, ask him to do ... off. Why? Because finally you are evaluated based on your research. So you can tell him that, sir, when my packet comes up, when you evaluate my research, you look at my teaching, look at my research, if I have not delivered, you tell me to leave, but it is none of your business now to tell me how I am spending my day. I think and that freedom is, I think, liberating. I at least find it really liberating. So these are the reasons why I would actually encourage you to choose, research. Go think about doing a PhD and come back and help India with its policy. So with that, I can now, if there are any questions on this part, I can take, or I can talk about the economy. So. If you look at the economy, I'm sure you will hear when okay, is this part being recorded? Whatever I've spoken so far, I've not said anything controversial, so that's fine. but what I'm going to say from now on, there's no media people here? No? No. Okay, it's only for internal circulation, right? So, if you look at the economy, I want you to understand what is, what we, where we are right now. Of course, there is a growth slowdown. from 7% plus, from 7.5% in fact, from over the 2014 to 2019 period, where now, the Q1 first quarter growth was 5%. So indeed there is a slowdown. But as you would have been learning in your economics classes, the impact at the macroeconomic level, what you see as growth it comes from things that have happened in the past, because there's always a lagged effect. The way an economy grows, and this is something that we wrote in the economic survey, is it goes through, economies grow when they're actually in a virtuous cycle. And when I talk about virtuous cycle, the virtuous cycle in the Indian context or a developing economy like ours starts from investment. It starts from private investment. Now, what does private investment do? Investment of any kind actually makes you more productive. For instance, just take the sort of the most immediate example, the fact that you are all here investing about 45 minutes of your time. Why are you doing that? Possibly because you get some ideas, or you become more productive. You learn something which enables you, to sort of, deliver more output, and that's about productivity. So investment enhances productivity, in the economy. When productivity goes up, at the firm level, productivity increases are reflected as increases in the net worth of the company, equity increasing. At the level of the people who work in the company, the employees, that is reflected as higher wages, because labor productivity also increases, and basically wages is related to labor productivity. So the virtuous cycle starts from investment, which basically enhances productivity in the economy. Enhancement in productivity increases the equity of companies, increases the salaries and wages that employees get paid. Also, quite crucially, what it does is an increase in productivity makes exports more competitive. Because when you think about exports, firms have to go and compete in the global markets. And global markets are extremely competitive. So, either if you're producing a good or service of a higher quality at the same price as other international competitors, or you're producing a good or service of the same quality but at a lower price, then only someone in the foreign market is willing to buy the good or service. So the way I've stated it, this is clearly about productivity, that either you're generating a good or service of a higher quality at the same price, or a good of a lower price at the same quality, which is about productivity. So when productivity increases, you have wages going up, equity of firms going up, exports improving, all of which then put money in the hands of people. And money in the hands of people is what then they use to go and buy goods and services, which is what manifests as demand in the economy. So when demand increases, anticipating increases in demand, firms invest more so that they can actually cater to that demand. Okay? In other words, the virtuous cycle has many legs to it. Starts from investment, especially private investment, which increases productivity. That increases exports, salaries, and jobs, and also net worth of companies. That manifests as purchasing power or demand. Anticipating that, companies invest more. Why is this that actually I'm spending time on this virtuous cycle? Because unfortunately, oftentimes everybody and his or her mom think that they know economics very well, and just keep talking about consumption. Consumption, driving economic growth is only one part of this particular leg. The way I've described it to you, investment, productivity, export, jobs, wages, then consumption, and consumption then feeding into investment. That's what. So it's only one part of the leg. And this is the other thing that you would realize as you start understanding more of the economy, that at the macroeconomic level, every variable is both a cause and an effect, which is that today's growth that you see, today's growth, economic growth rate, is the effect of investment, that happened actually, many quarters back, which had an effect on productivity some quarters later, which had an effect on, exports, wages, etc. some other quarters later, which then had an effect on consumption actually, maybe a quarter later. That's how actually the macroeconomy proceeds. In other words, every variable therefore is a cause and an effect. And if you're not careful, you can basically make the inference that, oh, it is only, consumption that is really causing economic growth. No. What you're seeing as consumption today is the effect of investment, productivity, exports, all the other things that happened in the past. This is really important to understand. That is what, that's the true picture. That's the full story of the economy. Now, keep this particular, concept in mind when I now talk about today's, what we are in today's situation, which is, if you look at our investment rates, a term that economists use, which is called the gross fixed capital formation, as a percentage of GDP. In other words, what is the proportion of GDP? What's the proportion of, let's say, if you are generating 100 rupees of GDP, how much of it are you investing back in the economy? That's what your, gross fixed capital formation is. At its peak, the gross fixed capital formation in the economy was touching 40%. In other words, we were basically plowing back 40 rupees out of every 100 rupees of GDP that was being generated back into the economy. But up, last year when basically this investment rate, really bottomed out, we were investing about 28 rupees out of 100. So from 40%, the gross fixed capital formation in the economy came down to 28%. Now, keep in mind what I laid out earlier, that investment, that entire cycle that manifests with a lag. So the decline in investment then has actually come back to slow down consumption, because wages have not, in real terms have not increased as much, and you have therefore consumption slow down. That is what is, a good share of what we are seeing today, the decline in the growth rates. Another important factor that affects productivity in the economy is what we call structural reforms. What are these structural reforms? Typically you have, there are inefficiencies in the economy because regulation may say you can't do this, you can't do that. Now, when you can't do this, you can't do that, basically freedom of choice of economic activity is actually restricted. Reforms are basically about trying to unwind or remove some of those restrictions so that people can do things and to the best of their ability, and that then increases the productivity in the economy. So if you see reforms from let's say the, let me just, it's a little, thanks. So if you see reforms over a 15-year period, starting from 2004 onwards. So from 2004 to 2009 we had a full-term government, 2009 to 2014 we had another full-term government, and 2014 to 2019 we had a third full-term government. So if you look at the reforms that were done, post 2004, for 10 years we basically did not do any reforms at all. What are these reforms I'm talking about? So for instance, around this, this kind of situation we had in 97-98 as well, when the Asian financial crisis happened, and when we did the nuclear test, Pokhran, when we did it, so there were sanctions that were imposed on us together with the Asian financial crisis, and thereby the world economy actually being down. We were in a similar kind of situation. What did we do at that time? We basically responded by doing significant reforms. There was something called small-scale reservation, which is that products were reserved for small-scale firms. We dismantled that. how did that help? Because smaller firms typically are much less productive than larger firms. So larger firms basically moved into the small scale sector. So that's one set of reforms we did. We built a lot of infrastructure. The Golden Quadrilateral, for instance, was built at that time. And when you build roads, you basically, what we economists call, we crowd in, private investment. We crowd in private investment, right? So the combination of reforms, I talked about small scale reservation. We also disinvested a lot. That was the time when basically Maruti and a lot of others were, a lot of disinvestment. Why is that useful? Because the savings in the economy, they go either into the public sector or the private sector. On average, the private sector is more efficient than the public sector. And so the savings in the economy are actually employed better by the private sector. So in this, period, we actually ended up doing significant disinvestment as well. But after 2004, if anything, we went back for a full decade, because we actually passed, these things like the right to food, what is basically the NFSA, National Food Security Act, which, giving 1 kg rice, and these are all ways in which you undermine markets. We had a series of, basically corporate scandals, which, and the banking sector, misallocation of capital. All those thereby have actually, together with that, what we also did is we made land acquisition very difficult by passing a law, which basically now says that if you have to acquire land, you have to go and find out two environmental experts in every district who will opine on the environmental effects. Now, India has about 750 districts, which means if you need two environmental experts per district, we basically need 1,500 environmental experts. I don't think we have that many environmental experts. So that just becomes an opportunity for rent seeking, where people who basically are not environmental experts masquerade as environmental experts and basically extract their rents. Stuff like this, So in the last 15 years, we basically have just done 2 pieces of structural reform. One, the bankruptcy code, which we actually implemented because that's an important part of credit culture in the economy, and the goods and services tax. So over a 15-year period, therefore, reforms which basically are really important for productivity in the economy, and remember what I talked about on the virtuous cycle, the productivity not increasing, thereby we basically have not enhanced productivity. So that is sort of the Achilles heel that has really come back to sort of pull us back. So the diagnosis therefore is that we need to be doing structural reforms. I think the corporate tax rate cut, which is important for investment, because think about it, how do firms decide whether to invest or not? They look at the risk of the project, and then they look at the return. When they look at the return, they look at the after-tax return for making the investment. And corporate tax rate cut therefore actually enables the investment. By the way, you'll hear some people saying, oh, corporate के लिए तो tax काट दिया, rich corporations को tax काटा है, poor लोगों के लिए tax नहीं काटा है, this kind of thing, right? You have to be a little bit more careful when that kind of narrative is given, because when suppose you are a shareholder in a firm, the corporation first pays taxes, and after that whatever is left basically is given to you as dividend, on which you pay taxes as well. So it's actually double taxation. Now when you are comparing tax rates on corporations versus, let's say, individuals, first of all, it's an apples to oranges comparison, because you're talking about basically distortion is double taxation. So when you remove corporate tax, what you're effectively doing is you're actually removing the double taxation, reducing the double taxation, and which is distortionary. I'm sure you've actually learned, you would have been taught basically when you impose a tax, how that basically creates deadweight costs, etc. The tax, the first level tax itself creates distortions, but when you have double taxation, the distortion is much higher. So this kind of narrative that you'll hear is not quite right. Actually, is not followed by sound economic argument. So to enhance investment, this is something that is quite important. We have done reforms now on enhancing the ease of doing business. So, in the recent rankings, we were ranked 63rd, and the only large economy to be ranked among the top 10 reformers for 3 consecutive years. And just to appreciate, we were actually in the 120s in the ranks, just a few years back. And from there, we're now at 63 in the ease of doing business rankings. And lest some of you think, oh, this is just a rank. It's the same rank that actually just ranking relatively, right, across countries. And so, the improvement in the ranking is something that we actually cannot deny. I would still leave that among these, while we've improved on the ease of doing business, one particular component where we still lag behind significantly is the ease of contract enforcement. Where ease of contract enforcement, what is it? Basically, you and I, let's say, sign a contract. Suppose we have a dispute, we go to a court. And the court, as I think all of you might have been very young, but there was this famous movie which had Sunny Deol and Meenakshi Seshadri, Damini. And then the court scene where he actually says, Tariq pe Tariq, Tariq pe Tariq, Tariq pe Tariq, Judge Sahab sil Tariq mili hai, insaf nahi mila hai. And that's what is basically the ease of contractual enforcement. The fact that it takes so long to actually enforce contracts. We are ranked 163rd out of about 190 countries in ease of contract enforcement. That is something that we are in the bottom 15% of the Committee of Nations, which is something that we really need to work on. So the corporate tax rate cut, as I said, is something that is important to foster investment and thereby make the virtuous cycle move faster, which is what is required for growth to pick up. And other structural reforms, labor regulations, reducing some of the labor regulations, making land acquisition easier. These are what are called factors of production. What are the main factors of production? You have basically land, labor and capital, right? So labor we need to reform, land we need to make it easier to acquire land. We need to basically, there's an exercise on to try and have property rights on the land records really be recorded very well using technology, which makes then transactions on buying and selling of land becomes easier. So these are some of the steps that are being worked on. So by when do you think will we be back to the high growth path? That's a question that you guys may have in your. I would expect that the second half of this year should be better than the first half. And if I'm invited next year, hopefully I'll have actually better news to share. Happy to take questions.
So sir, a few months back I came across this article in which mentioned a CAG report which said that the actual fiscal deficit of India stands at about 5.8% if we include the borrowings of the FCI, NHAI and other similar institutions, which are basically an extended arm of the government. Sorry. So, sir, don't you think by giving the fiscal deficit at about 3.5%, India is in a way fudging its numbers and showing the position as less serious than it actually is?
So, first of all, I think it's a very nice question. I'm impressed by the level of knowledge that you actually have about these aspects. Quick response: what is called off-balance sheet borrowing is actually revealed in the budget. Okay, so there's no fudge there as such. The off-balance sheet borrowing actually, and this is something which you need to understand. India follows what is called the cash method of accounting, at the national level. Unlike for instance, firms, when you look at the accounting that corporates do, they basically use an accrual method of accounting. Now, when it is a cash method of accounting, you then only look at the cash inflows and outflows this year. That's all. What is important to keep in mind is that the interest payment that FCI or any of the other PSUs have to pay as part of these borrowings, that is actually included in the budget. But what is, because this year suppose you have to make interest payment, that is actually in the budget. So in that sense, what is the cost of that particular off-balance sheet obligation in this year is already factored into the budget estimate. So the fiscal deficit captures the cost of the borrowings. What it does not capture is the interest payment you will make next year, interest payment you will make year after that, and so on, and the principal repayment. That is what it does not capture. So if you just add the off-balance sheet borrowing number, which is what the CAG does, and this is where economics and auditing actually are a little, accounting is about making some debit and credit entries, while economics is actually a lot more subtle. And this is with all my commiserations to all wannabe CAs here. So in that sense, there is actually some double counting there that you must keep in mind. The other, to ask the question, why do we care about the fiscal deficit? By the way, why do we care about the fiscal deficit?
The head of the foreign reserves.
No, why does it affect foreign reserves? It doesn't affect foreign reserves. It affects foreign reserves only if we go and borrow in foreign currency. These are actually all being borrowed in rupees. Fine, but that actually is, so there's something called the primary deficit. The primary deficit is basically just the expenditure minus revenue. So I'm not being very precise, but fiscal deficit is primary deficit plus interest payments. So why do we care about fiscal deficit? Credit ratings. But then my question is, why do we care about credit ratings? How does it affect long-term growth?
Because it will attract foreign investment.
So we will eat up our private investors.
Okay. So that's what is called crowding out of private investment, which is that if you have, let's say, if there are 100 rupees that basically savers in the economy are saving, now if suppose the government takes away, let's say, 20 rupees out of it, then there's only 80 rupees left for the private sector. Are you with me?
Yeah.
So when the government, when the government's deficit is high, it can create crowding out for the private investors, private corporations. Now here's where actually it's important, therefore this is a subtle point. If you look at the off-balance sheet borrowing, the off-balance sheet borrowing is being done primarily through the small saving schemes. Like NSS and it's a small saving schemes. Now, the small saving schemes are actually not accessible to the private sector. So, in some, of course, one can make the claim that the investor can decide whether to invest in the small saving schemes or in deposits of the bank. That point is actually well taken. But once the investor has made the choice to invest in the small saving schemes, that kitty, that 100 rupees, what I was talking about, is not available to the private sector. So in some sense, therefore, when you are tapping into the small saving schemes, the potential crowding out effect is actually not as pronounced there as it is in the case of if you are tapping into basically using what the banks basically raise as deposits, because if they invest in Government of India securities, they're basically lending to the government. If they give the same money, if they give us credit to banks, then they actually they sort of enabling credit in the economy and investment in the economy. So this point must be kept in mind. I think the summary answer is that number one, it is disclosed in the budget. Okay, it's not counted in the fiscal deficit because it is actually the cash method of accounting. The interest payments from that are though captured in the in the fiscal deficit number. So just adding this obligation therefore is actually there's some amount of double counting there. And the final point being, we care about fiscal deficit because we care about crowding out and the effect that it has on private investment, where you have to be a little bit more careful because the kitty that is available of small savings is not directly accessible to the private investor. I'm not saying that there is no impact, there wouldn't be any impact on crowding out. There will be, but much less than if it were basically deposits, the traditional fiscal deficit number. Yeah.
So I have two questions. फर्स्ट एनपीए से जो हमारा एनपीए है इंडिया का, ज़्यादातर पावर सेक्टर का एनपीए अराउंड 40%, और पावर सेक्टर का एनपीए 2003 में जब से इसका डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन और प्रोडक्शन को प्राइवेटाइज किया गया तब उतना नहीं था। हम लोग ने इस चीज़ को ध्यान में रख के किया गया था कि एनपीए बढ़ रहा है तो प्राइवेटाइज करते हैं, बट एक्चुअली में उल्टा हुआ। जो उस समय 1 लाख करोड़ के अंदर था वो अब 4 लाख करोड़ के करीब पहुंच गया। तो इस चीज़ को गवर्नमेंट किस तरीके से टैकल कर रही है?
ठीक है, मैं इसको पहले इस सवाल का जवाब देता हूँ पहले। तो ये जो बहुत अच्छा सवाल पूछा है इन्होंने, इसमें मैं एक कहानी कहना चाहता हूँ। एक्चुअली आप लोगों को जब भी मौका मिले एक्चुअली इन चीज़ों को पढ़ना चाहिए। कठोपनिषद में एक कहानी है, एंड this is important to basically understand the difference between correlation and causality. As they say, science is based on causation and superstition is based on correlation. Okay? तो ये कहानी क्या है? कहानी में एक कौवा आके, पेड़ की एक डाली है, पेड़ की डाली पे कौवा आके बैठता है। जब कौवा आके बैठता है तो उसमें जो उस पेड़ की जो मान लो आम का पेड़ है, तो जो आम है उसमें वो एक्चुअली नीचे गिरता है। अब कौवा सोचता है कि मैंने इस एक्चुअली आम को गिराया, ठीक है। इसमें प्रॉब्लम क्या है? हो सकता है कि जब वो कौवा आके बैठे तभी शायद एक्चुअली एक हवा चल गई हो, या फिर यूं हो सकता है कि वो जो फल था वो एक्चुअली अच्छा पका हुआ फल था, तो वो आके बैठ गया, गिर गया। इसका मतलब ये कि एक्चुअली कौवे ने एक्चुअली वो जो फल है उसको गिराया, ये कह नहीं सकते। These are correlated events but not necessarily causal. That's the point I'm making. So somehow the way the statement was, the question you asked, it seemed to be that it's privatization that has basically caused the NPAs to balloon up. But there are several many other factors, which is basically like the, जो मैं कह रहा था यहाँ पे हवा चल गई था,
वो हवा क्या है?
समझाते हैं भैया। So, by the way, this is the other thing that I'll urge you to, which is, how many of you have learned Bayes' theorem? All of you have learned Bayes' theorem, right? In Bayes' theorem, there is actually a prior belief, and then based on data, you have a posterior belief, right? So when the data comes in, you update your prior belief based on the data. Okay? My humble request is, when we all actually listen to people who understand stuff and we read evidence, we should follow Bayes' theorem, which is that हमारा एक prior belief है. In the face of evidence, the prior belief should change. That is what science indeed is. Okay? So, if we hold on to the same prior belief, then we're not being scientific about it. Okay? So, what are the issues with, first of all, basically, in the power sector, market discipline doesn't work, metering is not there. Okay? So, discoms, for instance, run at huge losses because metering has not happened. And as part of the Uday package, these were some things that there were conditionalities that were put for basically bringing in market pricing of power. In agriculture sector, for instance, power is free, which basically leads to a lot of excessive usage of power, and which also affects the water table, etc. So these are some of these are the hawa jo beh gayi, hawa. Many other factors that have also accounted for. So if you want to really study this is what you learn, when you do a PhD, saying कि बाकी सारे जो प्रभाव हो सकते हैं, बाकी सारे प्रभावों को ध्यान रखते हुए क्या आप कह सकते हैं कि प्राइवेटाइजेशन ही एनपीए की जड़ है, बाकी सबको ध्यान रखते हुए? That's what you learn a PhD. You do a PhD, you learn that. If you are interested, you should basically think about, to really make very careful statements by controlling for other confounding factors. So the short answer is that privatization is not necessarily responsible for the increase in NPAs. There are a bunch of other factors that are that are, and when we are talking about privatization also, it's not just, the broader point has to be about bringing market discipline, which is that, what you must be learning, right? With price should be equal to marginal cost when in a perfectly competitive market. Now, if you basically give something for free, what will happen? Excessive usage of that. So if you are not pricing some good, or service at the right price, then there'll be excessive usage and lots of distortions out of it, which is what brings the discoms under losses. You've also had a lot of electrification that has happened. The scheme. So as a result, what has happened is use of electricity has increased a lot. If it is not at market prices, pilferage is high, then obviously NPAs will go up. It's not because of only privatization. बाकी लोगों को भी actually in Indian Express, around, don't remember when. See, this claim that the unemployment rate is at its highest is actually again one of a comparison of apples and oranges. Actually, we're looking at data. So this is going to be a little bit of a technical answer. How do you measure unemployment? You actually use a survey. What the survey that's been done now is called the Periodic Labour Force Survey, PLFS. The survey that was used earlier was the Employment-Unemployment Survey. She's losing interest already. सुन तो लो, सवाल पूछा है तो. See, the earlier survey was sampling households based on their income level, while the current survey, samples households based on the level of education. And actually, what has happened, if you look at in any economy, those who are not studied at all, they'll be willing to do any job. While those that are studied really well, they'll get any job. In other words, therefore, unemployment rates are typically really low among those people who are either very well educated or those that are completely uneducated. Unemployment rates are typically higher among those people who are the educated youth. This is across the world. So when we move from a income-based sampling to a education-based, what it's actually reflecting is the fact that the unemployment among educated youth has been higher, and that is not just for the last 5 years, it's been true over the last 20 years. Okay, so that's the now the other, we've been looking at the data very carefully. Actually, salaried jobs and jobs that pay more and jobs in the formal sector have increased significantly, and people unpaid, for instance, if you look at those that are part of families who do let's say, I've started a firm, let's say, and I ask my wife to work and I don't pay her anything. That category is actually decreased. So overall, when you look at the number of jobs that are well paying have increased in the economy, and this is something which is coming from the actual labor force survey data, and I'm not holding a candle for anybody on this. Bayes' theorem. Okay, last question. She's holding on to her prior belief actually. So let me tell you one thing. See, I am actually an economist. An economist who is here to basically advise the government. Okay, I have my own beliefs, and I have my beliefs about what is right, what is wrong. But I am not an agent of the government. Let me make it very, very clear. Okay, unlike a typical bureaucrat who has to mouth, I have my independent opinion, and I'm giving you academically, well-grounded opinion. Of course, whether you want to apply Bayes' theorem or not is something that is up to you. Last question.
So, like you said, the corporate taxes will in turn increase the investments the companies make. But like the situation of the economy is, it's like salaries are low, wages are low. Like, why would people want to buy? And then how would the companies invest? Like there are 500 cars already which are to be sold. Now seeing the demand, the people are buying only 100 of them. Now what about the 400 why will the companies encourage?
Sure.
What will encourage them?
Okay, good point. Firstly, see, this is something which actually I'm still, we're in the process of trying to understand this better. Recently, Swiggy released their, financials. Swiggy's revenues have increased 50%. Okay? Many other similarly e-commerce companies as well, their performance has it's been very, very good. Now, the question is, if indeed there's been, and I'm not saying there is no slowdown, there is, but there is a lot of the digital economy is also doing very well, and our traditional GDP estimation methodology or the IIP index, we call the index of industrial production, those don't capture some of the new economy. Many of these GDP, in fact the GDP estimation methodology that we have actually dates back to the Great Recession 1929. Uske baad jo methodology dala gaya tha, wahi, that's what with some tweaks here and there we're actually continuing every country in the world, which is not able to yet capture activity in many of the digital economy. This is not to say that accounts for all the but we have to think about it. Every country is thinking about this. In the Indian context, this is possibly something very important because we've had actually, over the last few years, the importance of the digital economy has increased significantly because of moving away from cash economy to basically the more formal economy. So this is something that actually we should keep in mind when we are reading what is happening in the economy. Now to your point about investment, I think you're absolutely right, which is that investment will not increase unless they see signals for consumption going up, right? And I would caution you to be, automobile sector, a lot of what you read actually may not be quite right, because unlike, for instance, in advanced economies where automobile sales are used as leading indicators of the economy, in India it's not the case, because if you think about it, automobiles actually are, even a two-wheeler is owned by a very small proportion of the overall economy. And that's why if you look at in terms of the weight that automobile sector has, even in manufacturing, is not that high. So in India, automobiles is not really that representative of consumption. In other words, there are other aspects as well in consumption. Now your broader point is that there is undeniably a decline in consumption, part of which is because of also the NBFC, the problems that we are facing among the NBFCs, because NBFCs end up giving credit for consumption, right? Now, and the government has taken several steps. For instance, last week there was this package announced on the real estate sector. A lot of the non-banking finance companies lend to real estate developers. So, and many of those real estate developers projects are sort of 80%, 90% done. People have basically paid their, they've booked their flats, paid the money, lot of the money, but they've not gotten the flats. So the measures that have been announced on that to release this inventory of flats that is getting stuck will enable developers to actually improve their prospects and thereby also affect the NBFC sector, together with some of the other measures that were announced in the budget as well. Once the NBFC sector is doing a little better, consumption will go up, and then anticipating consumption, investment will also go up. I'm not saying this will happen in the next month, or obviously these will happen with lag, but we of course certainly understand that companies are basically waiting for signals on consumption to basically invest more. So thanks a lot. I know there are lots of questions, but I have to I'll get late for my next meeting.